Welcome to History of Art. Today we're exploring the life and writings of Giorgio Vasari, the great art historian of the Western tradition. And so let us imagine we're sitting in a quiet room in Florence. The year is 1574, and an old man is bent over a desk, candle flickering, quill scratching. He's 63, not young for the 16th century, and he knows he hasn't long left. His hand aches, his eyes are tired, but he keeps writing because he believes he is doing something no one has ever properly done before. He is writing the biography of every important artist who ever lived, from Cimabue right up to his own hero, Michelangelo, who is still alive, 99 years old, and still chiseling stone. The man's name is Giorgio Vasari, and the book he is finishing will one day be called The Lives of the Most Excellent Painters, Sculptors, and Architects. It will be gossip, hero worship, technical handbook, revenge pamphlet, love letter, and foundation myth, all in one. Without Vasari, the way we think about art, Renaissance, genius, masterpiece, style, progress, simply wouldn't exist in the form it does. So let's spend this episode with him. He was born in 1511 in Arezzo, a small hill town about 50 miles southeast of Florence. His family were humble craftsmen. His father made pottery. His uncle was a saddle maker. Nothing grand, but Arezzo had one huge advantage for a bright boy. It was the hometown of Petrarch, the great poet, and it still had a faint glow of literary prestige. Young Giorgio was good at drawing, so at the age of 12 he was sent to Florence to train, first with a stained glass maker, then with Andrea del Sarto, one of the most refined painters of the day. Vasari always remembered Andrea's studio as a kind of paradise. Beautiful youths singing and drawing, light pouring in, everyone competing to be elegant. That atmosphere, graceful, competitive, slightly camp, never left him. Then, disaster. In 1527, when Vasari was 16, the Medici were kicked out of Florence. The city turned itself into a shaky republic, and 2 years later the imperial armies arrived to put the Medici back on top. Plague broke out. Andrea del Sarto died of it. Florence was besieged. Vasari's father died. The teenage boy fled back to Arezzo with nothing but a few drawings and a head full of images. It was the first of many times he would have to reinvent himself. He survived by charm, quick wits, and an ability to paint anything anywhere. Frescoes in damp monasteries, marriage chests for rich merchants, temporary arches for princely weddings. He could knock out a perfectly respectable altarpiece in a couple of weeks and make it look as though he'd spent a year on it. By the time he was 25, he was working for the Medici themselves, who were now dukes rather than bankers pretending to be republicans. Duke Cosimo I was young, ruthless, and wanted to be remembered forever. Vasari became his decorator-in-chief. If Cosimo needed the new government palace, the Palazzo della Signoria, turned into a temple of Medici greatness overnight, Vasari was the man who could do it. He redesigned the entire building. Today we call it the Palazzo Vecchio, knocked walls through, painted giant battle scenes celebrating Medici victories that had never actually happened, and in the process invented a whole new style of interior decoration, busy, illusionistic, packed with allegory. You walk into the Salone dei Cinquecento today, and it's like stepping inside the Duke's brain. But the real love of Vasari's life wasn't painting. It was talking about painting. He never stopped gossiping, remembering, asking questions. Who was the best draftsman? Who had the softest flesh tones? Who had once knocked Michelangelo's nose flat in a fight? That was Pietro Torrigiano, by the way, and Vasari never let anyone forget it. He collected drawings the way other people collected coins or medals. He stuck them in huge albums and wrote notes on them. He wrote hundreds of letters. He was a one-man Wikipedia before the internet. In 1546, when he was 35, he had the idea that changed everything. Why not write a proper book about artists? Not just a list like Pliny the Elder had done for the ancients, but real biographies with childhood stories, jokes, disasters, love affairs, tricks of the trade. Everything. He started writing in the evenings after work, in cafes on scraps of paper. He sent questionnaires to anyone who'd ever met Giotto or Donatello. Old men wrote back with trembling hands. He travelled. He nagged Michelangelo, who was notoriously grumpy about such things, until the old man finally gave him a few grudging memories. The first edition came out in 1550. It was printed in Florence by a publisher called Torrentino, 2 fat volumes, and it was an immediate sensation. Suddenly, everyone in Italy knew that art had begun with Giotto in the 13th century, that nature had been reborn, that Florence was the new Athens, that Michelangelo was greater than the ancients. Vasari invented the very idea of the Renaissance as a historical period. Before him, people just thought things were getting better. After him, they thought they were living through a miraculous rebirth after 1,000 years of darkness. But the 1550 book had problems. Vasari loved Florentines too much and everyone else too little. Venice barely got a look in. Leonardo was dismissed in a couple of pages. Raphael was praised, but not enough. And worst of all, Vasari had got some facts wrong. He'd been too busy decorating palaces to check every detail. So for the next 18 years, he kept adding, correcting, expanding. He bullied Titian into sending him a proper autobiography. He went to Venice himself and fell in love with Tintoretto. He rewrote whole sections, and in 1568 the second vastly bigger edition appeared, printed this time in luxurious larger format by Giunti, with woodcut portraits of the artists, most of them imaginary because nobody knew what Giotto looked like anymore. This 1568 version is the one we still read. It's dedicated to Cosimo de' Medici, of course, but the real dedication is to art itself. Vasari divides art into 3 ages. The first age, the 13th and 14th centuries, is the age of revival. Cimabue, Giotto, the pioneers who learned how to make figures look solid again. The second age, the 15th century, is the age of perfection. Brunelleschi invents perspective. Donatello brings sculpture back to life. Masaccio paints like a god. The third age, Vasari's own time, is the age of surpassing the ancients. Leonardo, Raphael, and above all, Michelangelo, who combines the perfection of the second age with a sublime grandeur no Greek or Roman ever reached. It's a beautiful, tidy story, and it's been incredibly hard to shake off ever since. Vasari writes like someone telling you the best gossip over a bottle of wine. Listen to this, about Piero di Cosimo, the weirdest painter in Florence. He was very eccentric and so absent-minded that he sometimes forgot to eat. He loved to watch the sky when it rained heavily and lightning flashed, and he would stand there as if he wanted to see the end of the world. Or about Michelangelo's David. When it was finished, the block of marble had become the most beautiful thing that the world had ever seen. He can be bitchy. Poor Perugino, Raphael's teacher, is dismissed as a man of little religion who would not believe in the immortality of the soul, and whose later paintings were dry and hard because he only cared about money. Vasari is never neutral. He loves grace, smoothness, difficulty overcome with ease. He hates anything rough or unfinished. That's why he never quite understood Leonardo, who left everything unfinished, or the Venetians, who painted with their fingers sometimes and didn't care about drawing. But he's also generous. He includes artists who were broke, mad, or dead drunk. He tells you how to mix colors, how to prepare a wall for fresco, how to make gold look shiny. He's the first person ever to use the phrase rinascita, rebirth, for what was happening. He coins the term maniera for stylish elegance. He invents the idea that artists are special people, touched by God, not just craftsmen. Before Vasari, a painter was lower than a tailor. After Vasari, Michelangelo is compared to Dante and compared favorably. He died in 1574, just after finishing the last touches to the second edition. Michelangelo had died 10 years earlier, and Vasari wrote one of the most moving tributes anyone has ever written about another artist. I have no words to tell how much I loved that man. When he died, I felt as though my own soul had left my body. Cosimo gave him a grand funeral in Florence in the church of Santa Maria del Fiore, and buried him in his own chapel in the Santissima Annunziata. The inscription just says Vates Pictorum, the prophet of painters. 500 years later, art historians love to point out everything Vasari got wrong. He made up stories. He exaggerated Florentine superiority. He couldn't see that mannerism, the style he himself helped invent, was already turning into something nervous and strange. But none of that matters. He gave us the plot. He taught us to love artists as heroes. Every time you hear the words, Renaissance genius, some part of Vasari is speaking through you. So next time you're in Florence, go to the Palazzo Vecchio and look up at those endless ceilings he painted, full of muscular gods and impossible perspectives. Then go round the corner to the Uffizi, which he designed, and walk through the galleries he planned, so that you enter straight into the presence of Botticelli, Leonardo, Michelangelo, exactly the way he wanted. The whole building is his last great work of art, a museum shaped like a biography. And if you ever feel like thanking someone for the very idea that art has a history worth telling, raise a glass to that tired old man, writing by candlelight in 1574. Giorgio Vasari, decorator, gossip, myth-maker, friend of geniuses, and the man who taught the world to fall in love with art.